Hey everybody, this is Deji.
And I am Chris.
Welcome to the Lot1 Podcast episode. On this episode, we talk to Gabriella Mirabelli about generative AI and its impacts on the film and television industry. Let's get into this one. For the people who don't know who you are, can you give us a backstory?
Currently, I'm a marketing podcast journalist. I am a consumer insights, marketing, organizational design advisor to businesses and nonprofits. And I'm also a personal strategy consultant working with individuals to help them navigate whatever they want to navigate. Prior to that, I was the EVP of Consumer Insights and Brand Strategy for MRC Entertainment. And that's a media holding company. At the time I was there, they had digital publications, which were The Hollywood Reporter, Billboard, Spin, Vibe, Stereo Gum, live productions, Dick Clark Productions. So that's Rocking New Year's Eve, Golden Globes, MRC Television, House of Cards, Ozark, The Great, MRC Film, Baby Driver, Knives Out, American Fiction. And they had just launched their documentary division, which this year released Greatest Night of Pop. So that's sort of the zone where they were operating. And before that, I co-founded and was the CEO of an Emmy Award-winning creative services agency and strategic consultant agency for entertainment brands, helping them market and promote their content. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's great. It's a lot of cool stuff. What type of work do you do now?
So now it's the marketing podcast piece, the personal strategy piece, and then the consulting strategy. So I'm an independent consultant working with individuals and also with businesses, as well as doing the podcasting. The podcasting is a great way that I am constantly staying on top of trends. Once a month, I'm interviewing an academic somewhere. They've published in the International Journal of Research and Marketing. And so they can be anywhere in the world. And it's new research. For instance, the episode that went live with them last month talked about how doing this kind of interview makes people want to buy self-enhancing products because it degrades our sense of self because we see ourselves. And it's that kind of interesting research, which from a marketer's perspective, you say, okay, well, if I'm Peloton and I'm selling, I maybe want to figure out a way to be selling through this kind of call because you're going to be more inclined to buy. Or a gym membership, it's better if I sell it through a video meeting than if I have the person come in to the gym. I will sell more that way. So that's once a month I'm interviewing an academic about something. Once a month I'm interviewing the chief content officer of YPulse, which is a youth research firm. It's my favorite youth research firm. They are always in market. They interview a huge sample. They have all the data, and it's always really interesting, like what is going on with anybody who's 13 to 39.
Yeah.
Representative samples. It's really granular. It's great. And then the rest of the interviews are I would say a split between book authors. So, thought leaders. You've written a book about leadership or branding, emotional intelligence, how to communicate, things like that. And then I also am always on the lookout for CEOs who I believe are doing something innovative and interesting. The goal for me is it's constant education. When you ask, like, who am I? I'm a geek. I'm a geek and I have opinions and I'm happy to be challenged and really get into it in a debate. That is the best time.
That's awesome. That's really great.
What's the name of this podcast?
The Up Next Podcast.
There it is.
Nice. In the past, several months, I've listened to a lot of them.
Thank you.
It's great. It's a great show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. A lot of really cool information. And I've listened to a few of the
YPulse, maybe.
That's
the youth research one.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, actually. For those people who don't know what sort of generative AI is, can you kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of that?
Well, I think I maybe want to back up a little bit around AI. Everybody's AI, artificial intelligence. And I think it's really important to step back and say it's not a sentient being. It's not that. That isn't 100%. What it is. It's large language models and machine learning. And it's pattern recognition. This word happens, and typically this other word happens subsequent to that word. It's learning. And even that is a word that seems like sentience, but it's a machine that it's like a probability machine, a really sophisticated probability machine. And so generative AI being trained on all this data sets is you present it with a question, it understands the question based on probabilities of these things being related and finds answers based on these things being related. And I think that's part of why sometimes you get hallucinations that happens with generative AI, where an answer is provided to you which seems entirely plausible and it is utter nonsense, because it happens, because it's not sentient.
It's connecting weird dots. Yeah.
So I think there are some things, if you think about pattern recognition, if you think of it that way, then you can think of certain great applications like, wow, reading an MRI. Can you imagine if you had every MRI and you knew the then medical outcome and you could show this tech, this is the MRI, this is the outcome, and it could really start understanding or connecting those outcomes. And this is why Google knows if people are sick sometimes with things before the individual does, because these types of queries linked together have been linked with then this kind of thing. It's that kind of relationship.
One of the most helpful things that I've ever watched was Linus Tech Tips did a thing about AI and how companies today are just slapping the word AI onto everything. Because I had this conversation with a couple of my friends a while ago of how a lot of this technology, like in a different ways, had already existed. They just never marketed as AI. And now that it's huge, and I want to know your opinion from a marketing standpoint of like, why are they slapping it on everything?
Well, it's like blockchain or VR, like things get hot and people, I think that real utility can be found. And I think that also really malfeasance can happen. I mean, I think it's a complex thing, and I think there hasn't been enough regulation. I think also I have many thoughts. I actually think what you will start seeing, I believe the hedge funds, Sequoia Capital, those guys are like, we have pumped billions of dollars into this, and where is our return? Because there's a lot of AI, but what is it? Will people pay for what it's doing? Is it solving a real problem? Is it, there's always a trough of, everybody's all excited about it. And then excitement goes down because people want their return. They want to be able to see their 5-year, liquidation event. I do think there's real AI. I do think there's real benefit. I do think there are real ways in which it's helpful. Is it cost effective? Right now, a lot of it's free. So, wow. It's fun right now.
The Lot1 Podcast is brought to you by the Tourist Hat Coffee Company. You know what keeps me running on those long film sets, Stagey?
What's that, Chris?
Coffee. And you know what's the worst thing ever?
A swift kick in the pants.
No, bad coffee. So that's why I choose Tourist Hat Coffee Company's high-quality coffee beans. Their artisan-roasted, single-origin coffee and handcrafted blends are so much better than those stale stuff you get from those other brands.
Yeah, those things are bad.
Tourist Hat Coffee Company's coffee is artisan roasted, micro roasted, single origin, and their small batch roaster that handcrafts their blends to maximize peak freshness upon delivery. Family owned and operated. What more could you ask for from a coffee company, Deji?
I literally can't think of anything else.
If you're still not sold, a portion of each purchase goes towards contributing to some of their favorite nonprofit organizations, such as Animation Dance Community, Seeds of Hope International, and Beautiful Gate Orphanage.
These guys are good.
Make Tourist Hat Coffee Company your new go-to quality coffee choice with our exclusive offer for you, the Lot1 Podcast listener.
Oh, listen up, guys.
First-time customers can use the code LOT1BOGO at checkout to receive 1 free bag of coffee when you buy 2. That's right, Deji, buy 2, get 1 free.
Whoa,
So head on over to touristhatcoffeecompany.com and use promo code LOT1BOGO at checkout. Again, that is LOT1 BOGO at checkout. Whether you work in the film industry or not and want a delicious cup of coffee, this is the perfect time to stock up on your favorite blends of coffee or try something new. I know I'll be brewing Tourist Hat on my sets moving forward, Deji. Again, that's promo code LOT1 BOGO, LOT1 BOGO at checkout to claim your buy two, get one free. Terms and conditions apply. Tourist Hat, coffee that fuels your adventure.
How does a person sort of coming out of college go into the world where AI, going into a creative field where AI is present?
I've started to talk to people about AI in 2016, 2017, and these were hedge fund guys. Allen and Company, Sun Valley, all the tech people go. And he was like, oh my gosh, I just saw this thing. It generated a contract, like a legal contract. It's amazing. And they call it the T800, which is like, geez, it's like Terminator really made me, And so we had this conversation. He said, it's gonna be something. Now, remember, this is 2016, 2017. I'm having this conversation. This is nascent. It's investors. Nobody is really talking about it. And then really this year, people were like, oh my gosh, it's here. We are at an exponential point, the growth curve, right? Where things are really taking off. And a lot of people are like, oh, I really can't do anything, but it will be able to. And I think it's important for young people to understand that we are at that exponential place, the doubling place, where to understand exponential growth, it's the classic, what would you take if somebody said, I will give you $1 million today, or I will give you a penny and then double it every day for the month? What would you do?
The penny.
Yeah. Because by day 28, you've got $1.3 million. By
right.
day, and so by day 31, you're looking at $10 million. So it really starts when you're at that point. The acceleration is very swift, and we're just there where if you've looked at how Mid-Journey, what it was making, what it is making, what it will make, it's getting better. So as a person, you're leaving film school, you say, well, what does it mean? It's not doing the work right now. No, it's not. But it will change industries. It will change the types of jobs that are available. For instance, one of the gentlemen I interviewed, one of the academics I interviewed, and reached out. I'd interviewed him about an academic article, and he reached out and said, I've done this interesting thing. You want to talk about it? And I said, sure. What? So it's David Schweidel, and he's at Guazetta Business School, Emory University. And he, a year ago, took an off the shelf. So nothing super brainiac fancy, off the shelf. And he trained it a little bit more with data from an ad campaign. And what they were training it on was their brand values of ruggedness. It was probably trucks. I don't know. Is it, it's all those like, we're rugged, we're independent, and giving their tool only prompts around brand values. The tool generated ads that performed better in market than the human-made ads. Now, if that doesn't send a shiver down ad agency spine, this is cars. Cars are, big business in advertising, big business. And these ads performed better because it's something based on a large language model, because it's pattern recognition. What you have is sort of a pastiche of what's happened before. It's refinement and retooling, but it's not invention, it's reinvention. With fluency theory, which is the ease with which you process something that's familiar, it's easy to process. And there's also the beauty of averageness. People are actually drawn to average. And so so if you've data trained it on these ads, which were successful, it will pull something together that is beautifully average and will work. Now, would it work for a new product? You don't have the ads to train it on. Are there rights issues if you trained it on your competitors' ads? it's publicly available, but they own those ads. What does that mean? You know, there you start getting into, are these models even fair use? Like, can you use their output if it's visual? But regardless of how those things get determined, that says to me there are certain segments of business where a lot of people graduate and would get jobs, you know, commercial creativity, that are going to be skinnied down. You know, people talk about democratization, right? That's a big, like, oh, we're democratizing content. We're democratizing ability to market. That means a lot of people can do it. And, you know, if you think about scarcity and money and capitalism, if a lot of people are doing a thing, it doesn't cost very much.
Yeah.
There isn't much money there. So how many jobs are there? If, for instance, you can use ChatGPT to generate a first pass of a marketing copy, do you need a fresh graduate to generate a first pass of marketing copy? Maybe, but maybe not. And then how do you improve? How do you get better? Maybe it's great that one person gets a job, but 3 others don't. You know, so I think that what you've got is jobs will be made easier. And as a result, you may need less people. And you somebody going into the office in an old movie, and you'll see this sea of people and typewriters and secretaries. Secretaries were typing for other people. But once the personal computer came in, people typed for themselves. Well, if people are typing for themselves, there's not a secretary anymore. That's not a job. And so technology has always replaced jobs, and it's always changed the workplace. The question is it a tool? And will it, by virtue of being a tool, create other opportunities that we don't know what they are yet? Or is it sheer replacement? And then what kind of jobs will there be? And I think that anybody who says they're not replacing jobs is lying. Jobs will be replaced. The other thing is the jobs that are being replaced could be knowledge jobs. They could replace radiologists. That was the use case I talked about, reading an MRI. They could maybe be better. You're not going to have human, or you'll certainly have less variation. If you have access to every MRI and every result, you could have everybody have a perfect understanding of what these shadows and light spots meant. You know, once we got into big data, like, oh, we are going to make our development decisions based on data. We're going to be driving our database development decisions. We're going to be looking at audiences and who's pulling and what they're doing. Well, I used to maybe have a bunch of analysts who are pulling information for me. Do I need an analyst anymore, or can I use an AI? And if I have eliminated a bunch of analysts, what's the career path like? I mean, Chris, you worked in theater, right? Theater didn't go away. New tech came along. Theater still existed. More competitive than it was, probably. And there was a segment probably that had, you know, trust fund mommy and daddy who are subsidizing rent. If you're a person who has to make your own rent, that's a real thing. One of the things with when I'm personal consulting with people, I'm really real. You know, you've got to keep your job. You can't just, you know, sometimes you read these management books and they're like, well, you should, you know, live your dream and la, 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 la. You got to pay rent. You got to feed yourself. Well, exactly. And maybe you should take the leap, but you got to figure out how you're going to pay rent and food and feed yourself. Yeah. Those are real things. And to pretend they're not is fantasy. And so as a person who's leaving, advantage to the people who don't have ADD, because they're going to have executive planning. They're going to understand the importance of networking and how to network and how to figure out and plan and target and move that thing forward. And also, you know, you can leverage these tools. You can help them to make your, you know, it levels up the game, right? It levels up what you're expected to do. Also, it empowers you that if you're, you know, you've given it up and you're going to work in real estate, but guess what? These tools mean that you can make some pretty awesome, entirely your creative vision stuff with a very skinny crew. You can be a real creator, and maybe you build an audience on the side while you're being a real estate agent. And maybe that means that you leapfrog ahead and become one of these creators who knocks it out of the park and makes millions of dollars. But it does mean that you've got to be, things are purposeful. and you're not going to be able to sort of swish along. Every year, thousands of people graduate with arts degrees. I think youth survey, something like 80% of young people want to work in creative fields. Now, if shareholder value and efficiency was what's important, they're going to try to replace creativity with efficiency.
Hey, film industry folks, Deji here from the Lot1 Podcast. We've got big news. You can now be a VIP member of our film-loving family by joining our Patreon page. Get early access to episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and connect with fellow filmmakers. Your support means so much to us, and it helps us keep the reel rolling. Head on over to patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast, and let's make movie magic together. Thanks for being a part of the Lot1 Podcast journey. I think the big drivers for AI, the progression of AI, which tends to need a lot of money to keep going, would be bigger companies that are looking at the bottom line and trying to figure out, well, how do I get my money back? Kind of like you said before, in terms of we've been putting a lot of money into this AI and it's only replacing smaller jobs that are inexpensive, but this is an expensive tool.
Well, I think it sounds like what you're saying is, okay, that's going to hit the big players, but what about mid-size agencies, mid-size stuff? And I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that probably there is a middle place where there'll still be work. Now, the question there is who's hiring them? So if you're a small business, you are in between a big corporation, right? So who's hiring the small business? Is it small business working for other small business? Is it small business working, the B2B aspect of that business versus most small businesses aren't direct to consumer. They're serving a larger corporate entity. Chris, with your production company, who are your clients? Who are your funders? They're bigger than you, right? How are they valuing it? And it may be that you can find these niche things, but it may also be they can say, golly gee, we don't even have to hire writers anymore for a Marvel movie. We can hire an AI to, the plots write themselves. It's all special effects. Mid-Journey, we plug this thing in and it's expensive, but it's not as expensive as making it.
I think
and then we can pump them out more frequently or something. I mean, I don't, and you shake your head because you see it, you can see it. And I think that this is when we're talking about the exponential growth, that's where it's headed. And the thing that will be interesting is if the hedge fund guys pull the money before they get there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because
maybe they will.
The thing you keep talking about too is the replacing, starting at least the entry level jobs. If those entry level jobs don't exist because they exist for a reason, not just to be the cronies doing the grunt work, how do you make it to the next step or the step after that?
This is something, and I interviewed an academic about this because he was talking about using AI to generate ideas for research. And I said, okay, you're an expert and you can team with this AI. But part of getting to the point where you're an expert is you learn by doing, you learn by failing. Picasso didn't start being Picasso, you work and it's through repetition. It's being faced with a blank page. So how do you develop that muscle if you never practice it? And I think that how do you become an expert? If you never have to,
if you didn't do the journey.
If you don't do the journey, because you don't necessarily then understand why the structure is the way it is.
Yeah.
And you never have to understand why the structure is the way it is because, ChatGPT has always written the structure the way it is. But then let's say the power goes out. Can you write the thing? Are you learning from the pattern? Can you invent something new? I think that careers will demand a level of self-direction, which is often hard when you don't know where to go. One of the benefits of getting one of those internships, like you're in college, if you're listening and you're in college, get an internship at a big company where they rotate you through a bunch of different departments and talk and listen to people. Listen a lot, be helpful, because those people are the beginning of your network. And also seeing what the actuality of their job is, how it works, helps you understand things. Just in the same way that your college friends become the basis for the shorts you're making for Instagram, because these are the people and you think they're funny and you make stuff, and that's your network. That's the beginnings of it. And one of the things about working in a place like MTV back in the day was an amazing place because all these young people were there and they were really super creative and they were doing things. There's an energy to that. There's a creative, it's undefinable. It happens because you're together. And I think in real life matters. I know, and I argue with the people at Y Pulse all the time because I'm like, I need to get in real life. In real life matters. I believe there's an element to being in real life with people, to really getting the vibe of, and being fun and being creative and being in person. And bigger companies can, at least because they can afford to pay people, not for nothing. But so I had a production company. How many employees did I have? 10. How many, and they were nice, but it wasn't like 50. And part of that was driven by economics, who I was serving, what they could pay me, so what I could pay them, and then it got tighter and tighter and tighter. The other thing is how the industry changed. When I started my agency, we were shooting on film when we, which meant just a certain amount of budget. Like if you make 20% off your production and a shoot day is $100,000, hello, versus a shoot day being $5K, hello. And you still need the same lights. You still need, how has it changed? It's digital and the workflows were bananas. And with film, it was very like, here's your film and here's your stuff. And then in the end, we had a rough cut on a VHS tape and we'd go down to the lobby and give it to a guy who got on a plane and flew to California and gave it. That was how things were. It was a whole different cost model. And so, things change. If things are closer and closer to the bone, there's just less flexibility, less people.
Yeah. I think that some of the democratization of the digital age squeezed the middle out, because the middle is where, like you said before, right? Like if everybody can do it, it's cheaper. And
the barrier to entry was lowered, and it was lowered so much that there are a lot of, there's a lot of competition. And one of the old sayings, I'm sure you've heard it, is, Hollywood, you can make a killing, but it's hard to make a living. And I think that that's not untrue. I think you can do things. I think that this is where actually having concrete skills, which is in our pre-interview conversation, I was talking about like, well, what roles did you have on shoots? What were you doing? Having a skill, like if you're a good producer and you are good at negotiating rates with people and you keep track of that and you run a tight shoot, you will get work and and people will like you. They will work for you if you pay them on time and you run a tight ship. And then other people will be like, oh, let's get Deji on this job, and then, maybe it's a super low budge thing. And you're like, hey, I could also direct. Okay. Because you've been around and and you've been in the edit room and the shots you need. The trade school aspect of actually having graduating with a real life skill that you can actually do something is a huge advantage.
You leave college and you have some understanding of how to do the job. Mm-hmm, then you can use AI as a bit of a tool to sort of like help, right?
Yes, absolutely. I would say, and this is important for people listening, because AI is trained on things which may or may not have copyright issues. If you use AI, any visual AI component, if you're doing work for somebody and they say it's work for hire and you're saying that you're surrendering all copyright, blah, blah, blah. Often if you're doing work for a bigger company, they want that. You can't really use the AI visual because they haven't been cleared, or you have to fess up to what you've used or how you've used it so that they understand. Because what you don't want to have happen is you've done something on a shoestring, you've used the AI to make it look, to integrate something, and then somebody crawls out of the woodwork and they turn and say, hey, you're responsible. That's on you. You don't want that. I think that Adobe is ethical, like they're trying to do legal training. And so their stuff may, depending on the company you're working for, if you're using an Adobe AI, that may be something you could do. Again, you have to read the legal terms and conditions. It's like when you use stock photos, you need to understand what you're representing.
Yep. When it says it's royalty free, it's not just there's deeper meanings to that sometimes.
Here's the difference between creating like real creativity of you, for you, by you, versus commercial creativity where you're doing it for compensation, because people are what people are buying and the underlying rights that they believe they're buying and you're selling. And as long, I mean, honestly, as long as you're very transparent and say, AI was used, so I can attest to everything, all of my component parts, but this AI was used and I didn't, I'm not making any representations or warranties around that AI component. Fine, you've protected yourself. You just want to be really transparent. And I think it's always fair in a contract to have it reflect reality. You should never be forced to sign something that doesn't reflect reality.
If you like what you hear, then you're going to love our after show even more, exclusively on Patreon. Subscribe now at patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast. I've said this on a couple podcasts in the past, and I mean, me and Deji talk about AI all the time and go down the rabbit hole way too many times.
It's easy.
But it's so easy. It's just so confusing right now because it's like, especially coming from like me, who a small production company, it's like, I want to make sure that we understand these tools and where they're headed and where they're at the moment. And I don't want to just ignore them, because I think that would be the worst thing to do in the world.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to get left behind. But I also don't want to use them because, one, morally, I have issues with it at the moment. But two, I don't know, like you said, some of these, especially generative AI, it's like the potential legalities that come behind it, because where was it trained? Where is it used?
Here's where I think you can use it and use it safely. I think you can use it for reference boards, like mood boards. I think you can use it. Visual references. This is what we're going to, if you're creating something, this is what we're going to shoot.
Concepts.
I think it's concept stuff. Yeah. I think if you're doing scratch tracks using some of these AI voices, a lot of clients are really dumb and can't hear, like if it's your voice, but they can't imagine it's a woman, or they can't imagine it's something else. And there's some really great AI tools where you can actually speak. And so you get the timing right, you get the intonation right, and then the AI voice is laid over. You don't use that in the final product, but you use that in your rough cuts. Or you figure out, with some of those, you may be able to purchase and the rights are in there. Again, you're not hiring people. I think your ethical piece of like, is it taking a job? Is it doing something like that? As long as you're not saying, well, I do not have to hire any young people. If they're using it for a tool and it's more efficient, then fine. For instance, I interviewed Arad Ayel, who has started Quickture, was the creator of Flora's Lava, Netflix's Flora's Lava. And what he developed is this AI tool. It's a plugin for Premiere and Avid, but Avid's a little wonky, as it always is. And it helps the workflow. It powers, if you're doing a reality television, it's transcript based. And a lot of the assistant, like grinding through all of the hours of footage, and then you assemble like the dinner scene, and it's 5 hours of footage down to 5 minutes. And then if somebody says, oh, but make it the funny version, it can help you do that faster. Now, part of why I don't see that as taking jobs away is the clients, quite frankly, are expecting things on unrealistic timeframes. Everybody has pretended like creativity doesn't have a time component. And if these tools allow you to have more time for creativity, that's okay. I also think there's some administrative tools that are really helpful, Office 365 Copilot, or Google Workspace AI. Adobe Acrobat has an AI, like, again, for me, reading through academic research papers, it's efficiency. So I think that that's how you as a company, there are definite ways that it can help. Now, does that mean maybe you're not hiring an animator to create an animatic? Maybe. Does it mean that you can present something that is better looking and so sells better, that you're rotoscoping something and you would never have had the money for somebody to do the rotoscoping, but now you can? I think that's where, like, if you never would have had the money
That's
anyway,
what I'm thinking. Yeah. Like,
then have at it. It looks better.
If I have to choose between hiring someone to do an animatic and having an extra day on set to shoot, I'm going to choose the extra day to shoot.
Right.
If
Exactly.
I need the animatic to get the more money to then help the company to grow. Like, yeah, there's like, especially on the lower end, there's definitely some things where it's like, okay, we just don't have money. So how can I utilize these tools as long as it's not stepping over any, lines or.
I think that this is the place where people who you wouldn't have hired the person. You just would have, it would be nothing or this. That's a great tool, right? That's beneficial. Where it gets tricky is, I think, the larger companies, when you start saying, and then what's going to happen, I mean, to the David Schweidel advertising model, what's going to happen is some small company is going to say, they're going to start a new agency, because real disruption, that level of industry destroying disruption, comes at oblique angles. You're never going to have McCann Erickson be like, yes, let's do away with all of our staff. They're never going to do that. They just won't. That isn't in the DNA of the leadership. They may skinny the staff down, they may rejigger things, but they're not going to fundamentally eviscerate their own business model. Somebody else will do that.
I also think that, when, like, let's say for Chris, you use, because you don't have the money to, hire an illustrator to make your pitch decks to companies better. You won't do that now. But then what I think will happen, and it may not be you specifically, Chris, but other companies are going to have these tools which they've never had before, and they're able to compete at a level that they've never been able to compete before. They're not going to stop using these when they get bigger. They're going to keep using these because they're like, well, this has worked for me this entire time, But
this bigger company will have 5 pitch decks going out, and they're going to have more jobs.
Sure.
Other jobs. So the issue there is it going to be other jobs? Are they going to be able to hire more?
That's what I'm saying.
They're also, they're physical, like on set. If you actually are shooting, you need a person to do certain things.
Yeah, totally.
And so are we going to replace live action or not? If live action is happening, then you need people to do it, and if using some AI means that you can get a creative idea pitched in one, maybe you can also make a budget, somebody like, Chris's company can come up with a beautiful, like a Thelma. Have you guys seen Thelma, that film?
I haven't seen it yet.
It's beautiful.
Is it good?
It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful little jewel box of a film. And it's not a huge budget. It's about the acting. It's about the story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about, maybe that's okay that we start having some of those stories, and also if you have outlets, the giant maw of content, if you have Netflix that wants to put something out, or Apple or something else, where they'll buy it and they can now sell it internationally.
It just comes down to, like, morally, where am I willing to, like Deji said, like, would I just continue to use the AI even if we were a multi-million-dollar company? And the answer is probably yes, right? Because it makes sense and it's worked and it's our model. But the hope is that it's not necessarily destroying a job, because there are people who do that, but they also do more than that, right? It hopefully frees people up to be more creative. And I wouldn't be against the ideas.
That's the thing that people say.
Yeah.
That's what people say.
My thing is like, I genuinely believe that, because I have to, as a creative, because I am a creative, as much as I'm a producer. Like, for me, it's a business, but it's a creative business. So if you take away the being able to be creative out of it and use your own tools and your own, like, being able to go do it yourself, then what's the point of doing it? You know what I mean?
Well, it's a team sport. I think this is the other thing with entertainment, is it is about, what I was saying about MTV and the groups of people. Sure, you alone in your apartment could do all sorts of wonderful things, but you won't benefit. It's a team sport. It gets better because you have other people who are saying, hey, and what about this? And what about that? It gets better. I think what's challenging, again, is the speed with which things get done. And so, is there enough time to rejigger the other jobs? I just don't want everybody ending up, working in an Amazon warehouse.
Just typing in prompts into.
Well, there won't be anybody working in an Amazon warehouse because that'll be automated too.
So. That'll be automated too, right?
So we're nearing the end, Chris. I wanted to let you answer your very, very important,
I don't know if
huge
I
question.
Know this answer. If you had one piece of advice to give any of our listeners who are trying to get into this industry, what would that one piece of advice be?
Okay, I've got the
run
funny
away.
Answer. The funny answer is get your real estate license.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean that. I think my one piece of advice would be to be very mindful about your networking and staying in touch with people. I think people are often shy about their networking and staying in touch. And they'll say, oh, I reached out to this person 3 months ago and they didn't really respond. Yeah. Do you respond to every email? No, you probably don't. Yeah. But, pinging people periodically, but not being like, I'm so needy. Think about what would be interesting for that person to receive. The other thing I would say, young people, clear out your voicemail so that if you get a voicemail message, some job, that you actually pick up the message. Yeah. You get it. Check your email. Old people who have money and hire people send emails. Check your email. I mean, those are really basic things. But if somebody can't reach you because your voicemail box is full, that sucks for you.
Yeah.
Because you just missed an opportunity. How was that answer?
Good. I felt that voicemail thing, I felt that in my bones because I can't tell you how many times I've called people and it's just been inbox is full, or I'm like, oh
yeah.
Well, and what is that? Like, why is it just is it inundated with spam phone calls? What's going on there?
I definitely get tons of spam phone calls all the time, but I make it a point to clear it out. So
are you on the do not call registry?
I am.
I'm probably not, to be honest, because
sign up.
Yeah,
that would help your life.
Yeah, that's your second piece of advice. Sign up for the do not call registry.
Right. I mean, I just think there are certain basic housekeeping things, which if you make them habits, will make your life easier. Make it easy for people to hire you.
This industry is who you know. Really,
it's not. It's all about networking, and that is not an. Oh, this is okay. Related to that is if your parent, for instance, does know people. Don't be like, I will not use my parental network. Use that network. Use that connection because everybody else does.
Yeah,
everybody networks.
Don't be ashamed of it.
No. Own it.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. That was.
We could have talked for hours.
We've. Yeah, the after show is going to be. I already have questions lined up for you. So
okay,
thanks so much. But before you go, where can people find you?
I am probably most findable on LinkedIn. It's Gabriella Mirabelli, and I also post about the podcast. You can also go to the podcast webpage, upnextpodcast.com.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
and it was an awesome blast.
My pleasure. It was super fun for me. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
That's a wrap for today's Lot1 Podcast episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review and share it with your best friend's alien from Mars buddy. It really helps others find us. Big shout out to our producer, Mina Vazarian, and our editor, Carlos Luna. They are the real people who make the magic happen. And if you're not part of our exclusive Patreon community yet, head on over to patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast for early access, bonus content like the after show, and more. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our incredible Patreon supporters because your backing keeps the Lot1 Podcast lights on. Connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot1 Podcast. That is the Lot1 Podcast for behind the scenes content and updates. We're now accepting listener mail, buddy. You got questions for us or our guests? Drop us a line. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Lot1 Productions and all we got going on over there, check us out at lot1productions.com. That's Lot1 Productions. filmmaking.com.
Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tours Hat Coffee Company. Remember to use the discount code LOT1 BOGO, that's LOT the number 1 BOGO, BOGO, for your exclusive buy 2 get 1 free deal. Again, discount code LOT1 BOGO at checkout for your exclusive deal. That's a steal. You should be doing that.
Until next time, keep those creative fires burning, dream big, and remember, the filmmaking journey is a ride worth taking. See you next week.